Welcome to the Skeptic Zone, the podcast from Australia for science and reason.
Yes, it's the Skeptic Zone, episode number 184 for the 28th of April, 2012. Richard Saunders here with you from Sydney, Australia. Today on the show, I interview my old friend Tim Farley from Atlanta, Georgia. Now, Tim is the man behind the famous wtih.net website. What's the harm in homeopathy? What's the harm in iridology? Well, what's the harm in curses? And so on. At the top of the show with Tim Farley. Then after the break, it's the Think Tank with Eran, Segev, Dr Rachie, Maynard and myself down at our favourite club at the end of the street. Now today's Think Tank includes Dr Rachie Reports, where she's going to be filling us in on the latest fun and games of the Australian Anti-Vaccination Network and their attempts to get their vile message on American Airlines. Did they succeed? Well, they didn't. To spoil it for you right now, they didn't. But find out why in the Think Tank. Also in the Think Tank, we have great news for Maynard. In fact, I think there's a new segment in the Think Tank too. It's called What's in Your Bag, Maynard? What's in your bag, Maynard? You know, I'm very curious about that. I'm going to run downstairs, grab that lovely big mug of hot coffee. I'm going to come back upstairs and listen to The Skeptic Zone. Joining me on the line now from gorgeous, beautiful Atlanta, Georgia, which I wish I could visit more often, is Tim Farley from What's the Harm. Hello, Tim.
Hi. How are you doing?
I'm doing really well. Finally, it's so nice to be able to catch up with you. We only see each other very rarely. In fact, in Atlanta, the times I've gone to DragonCon, of course, I've seen you there, and at the amazing meeting, and I understand, we can kick off with this, you're appearing at the amazing meeting this year.
I am. I will be presenting one of the workshops on Thursday, which is usually how the amazing meeting kicks off, with a few really good workshops. They're an extra ticket item, but they're usually well worth it because we go through different skeptical techniques and what's going on in skepticism. And there's usually one on activism, and I think there's one on astronomy this year. And I am doing one that's called The Future of Skepticism Online,
Wow.
Crowdsourced Activism. It's all about crowdsourcing.
What time is that, do you know?
My workshop is at 2 p.m. on the Thursday that starts TAM, which is, July 12th.
That's good news for me because I fly in. I get to Vegas around about 10:40 that morning, so I'll have plenty of time to get myself to the hotel and attend your workshop. Fantastic.
Terrific.
I'll be the one waving at the back. You'll notice me there. But let's get back to the really what's put you on the skeptical landscape, the skeptical map, so to speak, is the work you've been doing with the wonderful website what'stheharm.net. What inspired you to do this? I mean, I guess it's pretty obvious what inspired you when you think of the name what'stheharm.net, but anybody could have done it, but they didn't, and it was up to you.
Yeah, I was I went to TAM 5 in 2007, and I was, as anyone will tell you, amazed by what was going on there, and I was particularly struck by the Sunday presentations, which are all done by regular skeptics, not celebrities, just
they
regular
call those
people.
The paper presentation, something
right.
like that, isn't it? Yeah,
and they just issued the call for papers for this year's TAM, too, so if anybody wants to do one. But basically, they're presentations on what people are working on. So someone will talk about how they teach critical thinking in their classroom, or how they built their website, or the year I was there, I think Robert Lancaster did a presentation about the Stop Kaz website, which was his project prior to Stop Sylvia. And so I saw that and I thought, wow, I could be doing stuff like that. Those folks are just like me. So after TAM, when I got home, I started kind of looking around. And one of the things that struck me is that it might be nice at an event like TAM to be able to say, why are we here? What is the purpose of skepticism? What good are we trying to do? So originally my idea was not called What's the Harm? It was going to be called The Wall of Harm. And the idea was going to be to put up some posters up on the wall and have stories of people who had been hurt by belief in the paranormal, belief in pseudoscience and whatnot, so that when we went to TAM or another event, we could look at the wall and say, these people are why we're here. And so I kind of worked on that for a while and started collecting stories. And when I started looking around, there's lots and lots of stories. They just hadn't all been collected in one place. Naturally, when I got done with it, I thought, well, it would be a shame to gather all this information together and then only see it once a year at TAM. So naturally, I immediately went to the website idea, and we never actually did it as a wall. Maybe someday we'll do it that way. Yeah. But and I think at one point I was going to call the website The Wall of Harm too. We have a memorial here in the United States for the Vietnam War that is basically this stark black marble wall with names carved into it. And it's just this long, continuous series of names. And it's quite striking if you visit it. And I thought to evoke that. But as we talked about it, I got on the James Randi Educational Foundation's forum, where a lot of people kind of hang out and talk about skeptical ideas, and kicked the idea around. And the wall idea, although Americans kind of got it, folks who hadn't seen the Vietnam Memorial didn't really get the wall idea. So we sort of dropped the wall out of the name, and then somebody said, well, why don't you just call it What's the Harm? That's what people always say.
That's true, absolutely, because it's one of the things that I get regularly from people I talk with or who ask me questions. I find it a fascinating phrase, because when people get to the point in a conversation where they bring up the phrase, well, what's the harm, they're almost, even if they don't realizing it, admitting that what they're talking about is not valid.
Right.
As a last-ditch effort to try and give it some respectability, they'll say, well, it doesn't do any harm, does it? Let people do
right.
What's the harm, et cetera, et cetera. Do you find that too?
Yeah, I really do. And then, of course, when you point them to the website, then start coming the rationalizations and whatnot. They start nitpicking all the cases and saying, well, this case is actually just malpractice, and this person hadn't read the right thing or whatever. So they always find excuses for each of the cases. But yeah, people really do say that, particularly with things like homeopathy. It's like, well, you say it's just water, so what's the harm in water? It's like, well, water can be very harmful if you're taking it in place of the chemotherapy that you should be taking.
And I'm just clicking on your website now, what'stheharm.net, and right on the front page there's a link to homeopathy. And as I scroll down, it's quite a long list of cases here. What's the harm in homeopathy? I'll click back to the front page again, and there's so many items covered there. You've got lots of things listed under medical, like acupuncture, homeopathy, again, chiropractic, iridology, psychic surgery, cupping even, colon cleansing, and on it goes. And then we've got the supernatural, the paranormal, curses. Now that's an interesting one. I think that's particularly harmful. It's true. I mean, what I mean by that, of course, is in this country there are confidence tricksters going around telling people that they're cursed.
Right.
And for a certain fee, they will remove the curse. We've got religion. And a topic that's just come up in the news lately, which is quite interesting, is breatharian or breatharianism, where people claim they can live on sunlight. That's come up in the news lately because someone sadly died, and it prompted me to look online and look through my personal files to discover a report done by the 60 Minutes program here in Australia in the late 90s, where they tested one of these people who failed miserably. How do you come up with these topics? Are they suggested to you, or I guess some of them would be quite obvious ones?
Yeah, there are some that were obvious. Some I just kind of started looking for, knowing that any alternative medicine thing typically is a good target. The key was finding the stories, because one of the things I wanted to stay away from is theoretical stuff, because a lot of skeptic sites talk about the theoreticals of, if you believe this, then you might do that. I wanted to stick with concrete stories of people who had actually gotten hurt, and always stories that I could document with news articles or a scientific paper or some decent documentation somewhere that I could point to and say, well, this really happened. And breatharianism came up. A lot of times what you find is that when people write stories about these things, they'll the typical pattern for writing a magazine story about some problem that we need to address is to have a personal story at the beginning of the article. And so, but typically each article will have one personal story. And one of the goals of the site was to try to kind of gather all those together in one place. But that recent breatharianism story was really interesting, because I had thought that was long done with, that nobody was practicing that anymore. But apparently this woman, it was like a year ago, I think, or so, or maybe a year and a half ago. It was a coroner's inquest, I think, that came out in the news. Yes. And she had died from trying to follow the lead of a Indian guru who had posted some movie. And I believe you can watch at least part of the movie on YouTube. And he was claiming that he was living only on sunshine. And as you know, usually when you dig a little deeper, you find out they're not just living on sunshine.
Now, living on a lot of hot air would seem to me. But I think that would be a particularly horrible discipline to follow, because as my listeners know, I really like a good nom, as we say, especially when I go to the amazing meeting and have those fabulous crab legs at the South Point Casino. And speaking about having good dinners and good lunches and things, it reminds me of the fabulous times I've had at Dragon Con in Atlanta, Georgia, where I always catch up with you. Are you doing Dragon Con this year?
Yeah, I'll be there. It's right down the street from me, so you pretty much can't keep me away. I'm not sure what I'll be doing in the way of panels or whatever, but I'll certainly be there. So we'll definitely be there. I usually bring my wireless router down and provide some Wi-Fi in the room at the very least.
Yes, sadly, I don't think I'll be able to make it this year. I didn't make it last year too, which is too bad, but I guess the world being as big as it is, it can be difficult to cover all these bases. But I'm glad there is a good skeptical presence now for some years at Dragon Con. James Randi always makes an appearance there. I think DJ Grofey, Derek and Swoopy are there, of course, many other good skeptics. I think those sort of things, and people ask me why I go to these things like the Amazing Meeting or Dragon Con when I can. I think from the point of view of what you learn yourself there, I think it's well worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. And trying to share knowledge with other skeptics, what people are doing in their own hometown. One of the neat things about it's certainly a lot of knowledge sharing at TAM. At Dragon Con, there's an interesting element because there's definitely an outreach element, because the larger event that's going on around the skeptic programming is non-skeptic. It's all these comic book and science fiction and fantasy and role-playing game and video game fans all gathered in one place. So quite often you'll get people wandering in, what is this skeptic thing? And they'll sit down and listen to Joe Nickel or somebody talk and maybe learn something about science that they hadn't anticipated. And amazingly enough, the skeptic track at Dragon Con has actually become, they have like a whole series of custom tracks. So there's a Star Trek room and a Star Wars room and a comic book room and a podcast room and a science room. And the skeptic track is so popular that it's expanded to take over 2 adjacent rooms. It's one of the largest individual track rooms at Dragon Con. It's that popular.
I remember when it did that. I think it did that the last year I was able to attend. But I do remember of Dragon Con, it's absolutely crazy manic, but the outreach is fantastic. along with Dr. Rachie. I think last time we were there, we did our Mystery Investigator show for a room full of young children, and that was just delightful to be able to have that chance to reach out with our show in another part of the world. So yes, I think these meetings are absolutely worth it. And I seem to remember you were running around with a What's the Harm t-shirt, because somehow I ended up with one, which I was quite pleased about.
Yeah, I need to get a few more of those made. I made a bunch at one point, and I ended up giving a lot of them away.
That's how I ended up with one, right?
Got to spread the word. But
yeah.
I've been doing a lot of work lately on my follow-on project to What's the Harm, which is my blog called Skep Tools. Right. And what we've been doing there is trying to basically come up with new ideas of how skeptics can do things on the internet that will help improve the quality of information or help direct people to better information or steer people towards skeptic websites. And that's kind of where the workshop that I'm going to be doing at TAM came from, is looking at some of these things like Foursquare and Web of Trust and Wikipedia, where people are cooperating in large groups, and there's interesting ways that you can use these tools online to the ends of skepticism. So I'm putting a whole workshop together on that topic. And what's neat about it is that these things usually avail themselves to as little or as much effort as the person wants to put into it. If you want to spend 30 seconds clicking a rating on Web of Trust and then go on about your business, you can actually make a difference. Or fix a typo or fix some vandalism on Wikipedia. And that little 30 seconds or 1 minute that you spend doing that before you go to lunch can actually make a difference in the quality of science information on the net. And if we get enough skeptics doing that together, it makes a huge, huge difference out there. So it's a really neat way for a skeptic who, maybe doesn't have enough time to do a big project, to do little projects every day. So I find it very exciting. It's a way for folks to get involved on a whole new level with skepticism, and they can do it right from home using their computer.
That's the world we live in. It's changing so rapidly. I think we do our best to keep up. I'm glad there are people like you out there keeping up with the latest changes. And it's a bit paradoxical, because when I look at the website of What's the Harm at what'stheharm.net, it's so simple. It's a wonderfully simply laid out website. There's no flashy gimmicks. There's no nothing. It's just here are the topics. Click here and you'll find out more.
That was pretty deliberate to try to make it as simple as possible. I didn't want you to see it and think, oh, well, somebody spent a lot of money setting up this website. And I wanted it to just be very simple, and it would work on anyone's browser. You don't need anything special or flashy. There's no video or anything like that. It's just a bunch of text and some links out to some news sites that will give you the details on each story. It takes a bit of effort, and I've got a project underway to do an update to the site this year. One of the things I would like to do, if I can find the time, is to post longer stories. Not all of these stories have a lot of details, but some of them do, like the Penelope Dingle story. Quite a lot of details have come out about that.
Oh, yeah.
And it's worthy of writing at length, but the way the site is set up now, I don't really have a format that allows me to write at length, so I may be converting it more to almost a blog-like format. It'll still have the category pages and whatnot, but there will probably be some longer features on the site at some point. So, I've got so many projects between the SkepTools blog, and I occasionally blog at randy.org, and I do some podcasting stuff, and it's sometimes hard to keep it all juggling.
Oh, it's going to get even harder for you, because I'd love you to do a semi-regular segment on the Skeptic Zone, where it's Here's the latest. Oh, Tim, yes, what's the harm in homeopathy? Well, funny you should ask. Let's see if we can work something out like that. But I was just noticing on your website here, we have a section under GPS navigation systems. So
yeah. People always ask me about that, and I kind of put that in there somewhat. Well, I found a few of the stories, and I thought, this will be a good category to put up that isn't completely depressing. Yes. So many of the other categories have people who have died just needlessly, but nobody died on the GPS page. They just maybe had their car ruined or in a lake or something.
All right, we can afford to have a chuckle at some of those, I guess, but certainly the pages, the website is a wealth of information for when somebody asks you in conversation, well, what's the harm? You could run to this website and see for yourself what the harm really is, and things like ear candling I see there, for example, or folk remedies, voodoo, witchcraft, ghosts, magic, so many topics, and all with references about the real harm being done through lack of critical thinking, I guess we could say.
And if they want to take it further or find out about the other projects I'm working on, just go to skeptools.com, skeptools.com, and that's a blog, and I talk about all sorts of different ways that you can do skeptical things on the internet.
Tim Farley from whatstheharm.net, thank you for all your hard work. Thank you for putting up those websites. And I look forward very much to catching up with you in a few short months' time at the amazing meeting in Las Vegas.
I'm looking forward to it myself. Thank you.
In a world where the truth is a matter of opinion, where messages are received from beyond the grave, and reason is sidelined for magical thinking, only three men stand between the truth and a postmodernist abyss.
What date is it? 7th, 8th? 7th, 8th?
This is impressive. Are these artist impressions?
They're not. They're photographs of Chinese lanterns.
It's not. It's not.
We are not well researched.
Yeah, because
good God, we're full.
We don't discuss cryptozoology on this show very often because we don't know anything about it.
That's true. That is true. The price gets lower and lower and lower, and then he hits a ceiling.
It's a ceiling from the room below.
Skeptics with a K from the Merseyside Skeptic Society. Find us on iTunes, or don't.
Join us now for Drinking Skeptically in the Think Tank.
No way. I've only been there 3 times, so I didn't notice that.
Are you suggesting that Las Vegas is over the top, Dr. Rachael?
Eran was suggesting that might be the case, and I just can't believe it. I'm flabbergasted.
I'm shocked.
You do notice it after you visit a few times. You notice that it's a little bit over the top.
Yeah, the first time it's just pretty like going to the supermarket, isn't it, really?
Yes.
Look, I've done things in Las Vegas that are only illegal in Las Vegas. It's fantastic.
I think we've just introduced everybody. Yes, joining me tonight in the think tank, and cheers, everybody. Cheers, especially.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Oh, this is made of plastic. You can't
do it. Dr. Rachie, Eran, Segev, and Maynard joining me tonight in the think tank, and we have a couple of reasons to celebrate. I've been celebrating already. With real champagne tonight. First of all, it's an odd think tank because we're going to kick off with a Dr. Rachael reports in a moment. We have reason to be happy with the Dr. Rachael reports, and also it's now dead set, certain, definite tickets bought. Maynard is going to Las Vegas.
It's such an exciting thing, and look, I'm even going to take the challenge, and people said I should look up Mrs. Sinatra. Of course, Mrs. Sinatra used to be on my breakfast show, and she's from Las Vegas, but we must remember that 5 years ago, Mrs. Sinatra was 85. So if she's still with us, she's 90. So if anyone knows if Mrs. Fred Sinatra is still available in Las Vegas, she might not be at her house anymore, I should pay her a visit. If anyone knows, that's going to be the hard bit.
Oh, that should be interesting. But it's a big thank you to all the listeners who did help along the way.
Look, I've got to thank you all for being part of this. It's the first time I've won anything.
Well, Maynard, you worked hard for this. You've been filing reports for a long time now for the show. And it's the least we could do to say we appreciate what you do, we love your interviews, and we can't wait to see what you dig out of Las Vegas.
Look, I challenge anyone to go back and have a listen to the TAM Australia interviews and think they're good, but I think that's because everyone's forgotten what they were like that they put the money in. But you'll get more of the same, just Las Vegas style this time around, I promise.
All right, fantastic news indeed. Now let's start, and I'll play your theme song now, Dr. Rachie.
Now it's time for Dr. Rachie Reports with Dr. Rachael Dunlop.
The crowd here love it. I mean, we haven't had an audience of the Think Tank before. There are thousands of people here. Dr. Rachie, let's have your report this week, and I think it's about Merrill Dorey and the Australian Vaccination.
It is about the Australian Vaccination Network because we haven't actually done an update on this for a while. Did we discuss it in the last Think Tank?
We would have talked probably in passing, but the whole thing about American Airlines wasn't a news story 2 weeks ago.
No, but I'm just thinking about whether we discussed the court case and so let me just give a quick summary in case listeners aren't up to speed. So people that are regular listeners would be aware that the AVN lost their charity licence in 2010. And that followed from a public warning that was issued by the Healthcare Complaints Commission in New South Wales. And the AVN challenged that decision by the Healthcare Complaints Commission in the Supreme Court in New South Wales last month or the month before, and they actually won that case on a technicality. Doesn't matter, they still won it. And as a result of that, in the last few weeks, their charity licence was reinstated. Now, this was despite the fact that the charity watchdog, I suppose you'd call them here, found 25 breaches of the Charities Act according to when they did an audit on their books, and these attracted fines up to hundreds of thousands of dollars and potentially 2 years in jail. Now, this is because they had collected funds for charitable purposes and then used them on something else, like spent them on other things. And in some cases, funds went missing. And as a charity, you generally can't do that. You know, you can collect funds and you have to spend it on the cause for which you collected it. Anyway, so we were very surprised and very disappointed, obviously, that their charity licence was reinstated recently. However, the fight continues, and just a couple of days ago we had a win, which was nice because for the past few weeks we've had a couple of big losses. And this was around the an advertising campaign that the AVN had planned to put on American Airlines. Now, last year, the National Vaccine Information Service, which is run by Barbara Lowe Fisher, they had public service announcements running on Delta Airlines across the states, where it was just leading up to flu vaccine month in America, and they were running public service announcements saying how bad the flu vaccine was and you didn't need it, and all this anti-vax stuff on Delta. Now, actually, I happened to be flying Delta during that period, and I flew across the country twice from LA to Miami and back, and I didn't see the ads at all. Oh. So apparently they were on Delta, but I didn't see them. But in this case, American Airlines had apparently offered the AVN 3 minutes of video in addition to a section in their American Way magazine. Now, as soon as we heard about this, and the way that we heard about it, in fact, was Merrill was bragging about it on her blog.
She was, on the AVN's website.
Yeah, and she sent out a press release about it. And so a few of us received that, and it was forwarded to us by some other people. And so we were a little bit concerned about this because we actually got access to the interview that would be part of it would be airing on American Airlines. And it turned out that it's her same sort of canards and tomes that she rolls out every time.
Autism, etc.
Well, exactly. I mean, she was still, in that interview, she's claiming that vaccines have a link to autism, as if she hasn't, beaten that horse enough.
Yes.
And I've got to say, look, I mean, she's been told so many times, and she must be aware that that is false. That she's just...
It doesn't matter.
It's like she's being deliberately dishonest, allegedly. So... Anyway,
one could get that impression.
One could get the impression that she's being deliberately dishonest. Yeah. So anyway, a few people got together and first of all started tweeting American Airlines. Some emails went around in the background. Phil Plait picked up the story.
Yes,
he blogged it on Discovery, which of course is one of the highest read and most popular science blogs in the world. People wrote letters to American Airlines. And within 48 hours, I woke up on Tuesday morning, I think it was, at 7 a.m.
Yes, that's right.
It was pulled.
Yes, I woke up too and I checked my Twitter stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By 7 o'clock in the morning on Tuesday, it was gone.
Yeah.
So it was about 48 hours of people writing. And, I mean, we hadn't even actually started the campaign, really. I had some people in the background that were doing some work, and a lot of other people had other people doing some work, which were all sort of getting together to start to do a big campaign to go to American Airlines. And before we knew it, they'd said, no, we're not having a bar of it. But what's interesting about it is that they tweeted, and this was also received in email from their media relations department to people that I know. They said they'd never actually received the interview.
I saw that.
They hadn't yet received the interview, so they hadn't actually approved it anyway.
Yeah.
Now, we looked into this a little bit further, and what it turns out is that American Airlines have all their material produced by a production company, obviously. They don't do it themselves in-house.
I thought it was one of their pilots doing the interviews, no?
Oh, well, they are in financial strife, so maybe it is.
They're doubling up, yeah.
No, they do have a production company that we're going to be dealing with this.
Well, fair enough. That's what large companies do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So their official Twitter account said, look, actually, we didn't approve this, and even if we had received it, we wouldn't air it. It's interesting that Merrill had written this press release and blog post, because even American Airlines wrote to a journalist friend of mine and said, despite what you've seen in press releases, we have not approved this happening. Now, I think we've discussed this before in the think tank, maybe, that sometimes I think Merrill is her own worst enemy.
Well, sometimes.
Sometimes, because we would never have known about this if she hadn't told us, and if she hadn't sent a press release to all our friends who are journalists, and then we would never have known to alert American Airlines. Now, there's a couple of... It's a little bit more complicated than that anyway, because it turns out American Airlines are about to merge with US Airways. They're in a lot of financial strife at the moment. So perhaps even just that small number of people writing to them and saying this is bad for the health of children, for the health of the country, may have been enough to encourage them to say, we don't even want any whiff of controversy right now. Our share prices are bad enough as it is. We've got to have this takeover happening. We don't want any controversy.
There's also another issue. There's another issue, actually, sorry, excuse me for a second, but related specifically to them, and that is that they were implicated in the spread of measles to California. And because
Minnesota, wasn't it? Or California?
I can't remember. But basically there was a girl, I think, who was on a flight, on an American Airlines flight, that just by her being on the flight, something like 12 people got the
she
disease.
had been to Nigeria.
I don't remember the exact details, but
yeah, she'd been to Nigeria on holidays and came back to the States infected with measles and infected, I think, 18 people in Minnesota. That was only 2 years ago. And American Airlines had to be involved in that investigation because the child was on their flight. Yeah. So they've been burnt before. Yeah. So, and also, on top of that... Oh, sorry,
I think my recollection is that they were kind of a little bit blamed for it because the girl was clearly unwell and they still let her on the flight, and which they're not supposed to do. And so I think they're being very cautious about these things now.
Well, I thought it was interesting because the first notifications that I saw was from their Twitter account. And actually the way it played out was quite interesting because initially... You know, generally these days with Web 2.0 and social media, as soon as there's an issue, people get onto the tweets and go to the tweets. And their first reaction was, it's optional to listen.
Oh, I love that.
They were really dismissive on Twitter, on the official Twitter account. They were like, you don't have to listen to it, so, you know, just go away. And so, of course, people's response to that was, well, we don't have to fly with you. And they were like, well, we don't care because, I mean, Merrill was saying in her press release that it was potentially going to reach 85 million people or like huge amounts of people that would be on these flights. The reach for this was potentially huge. Yeah. Now, the other issue is, and you've alluded to this a little bit, is that last year in the States was the worst year for measles since, I think, 1995. They had something like 220 cases of measles last year, and every single one of those cases was imported to the States. So,
really?
No, actually, maybe not every single one. No, that's not right. It's something like 70% of them were imported to the States.
Quite a lot.
the majority were imported.
Wow.
So they're coming in through travel. In addition to that, the Olympics is coming up, and the CDC and the WHO have warned all travellers to please make sure their immunisations are up to date.
And to wash their hands, actually, I saw that.
Yeah, well, particularly because there's going to be a heap of people moving across the globe, in the middle of this year, and potentially taking infectious diseases, in aeroplanes. So I don't know how American Airlines went from you don't have to listen to all of a sudden, that's it. There must have been some discussion somewhere. But, I mean, I've got to congratulate them and thank them for that decision. I mean, apart from the fact that it would have potentially been a huge public health problem, and you can imagine, I mean, they're going through this merger, and can you imagine if they'd brought in like 6 cases of measles or... there'd been outbreaks all over the country and everyone's pointing the finger at American Airlines. They just don't want any of that.
Now, the reaction from Meryl Dorey and the Australian Vaccination Network is things we've all seen before. Crying, victim crying, this is censorship, this is and invoking the founding fathers of the United States. Did you see that?
Yeah, she's written this. Well, so basically what happened was it's done, and so... Some people maybe told some journalists about it, and so it's been huge news coverage in this country. We've had the Murdoch Press cover it, which is Australia-wide. We've had a whole lot of medical journals cover it. It was on the front page of Meryl's local paper yesterday.
Under the banner Anti-Vaccination...
Avian grounded
yes.
Anti-Vaccination group hits a snag.
Yes.
Front page of the paper. Which I've got to say is a turn up for the books, because until a few years ago that paper absolutely pandered to her.
Yeah.
They were very sympathetic to what she was doing there. It's her local paper. They've changed their tune dramatically. They're now using anti-vaccination group as opposed to vaccination pro-choice, which is what it used to be. So there's been a huge amount of coverage. Meryl set up... I've got to say that Paul Gallagher, he was one of the guys that spearheaded the campaign, and he set up a petition which overnight had something like 2.5, almost 3,000 signatures.
Including mine, yeah.
And he also wrote the very first blog post about this, so he's got to get credit for this too. But Meryl has set up her own petition. Now, I checked it this afternoon. And
she smirks all round the table.
This is a serious issue. I checked it this afternoon and she had 145 signatures. She was hoping for 3,000. But you mentioned her invoking the founding fathers and all that. So she's got this very long blurb about how this is censorship and freedom of speech and democracy and da-da-da, which just makes me lol, because she's only interested in freedom of speech if it's hers or she agrees with it.
Yes.
Never mind the fact that American Airlines exercise their free speech and their democracy to say, we're not taking your advertising. Yeah. Never mind that.
The thing is, as an American, and I apologize to the Americans for mentioning that, but she should know what freedom of speech actually means. In Australia, we do not have freedom of speech in our constitution. But freedom of speech in America does not mean that you can say whatever you want, wherever you want. What it means is it's much more difficult to sue you for whatever you say, and the government cannot restrict you. It does not mean that a club or an airline or whatever have to give you a platform. That's not what freedom of speech means. She can write whatever she wants on her blog. Nobody will sue her for her blog or website or whatever. But she thinks that every time people just don't want to hear what she says, or people do not give her a platform, that's censorship somehow, or somehow against freedom of speech. Rubbish. It's nothing of the sort. She just doesn't understand that.
But the funny thing
about
that...
kind of figures, because she doesn't understand a lot of things.
Yeah. Look, I'm sure if Benjamin Franklin was here too, he'd be very confused about being in an RSL in New South Wales. But he'd also... he'd probably also, as a bit of a man of science, I think he'd give vaccination the evidence-based results it deserves.
I'm sure you're right. You know what Benjamin Franklin, his pseudonym was?
What, a funny guy in no pants? What was it?
He wrote under the pseudonym of Richard Saunders.
Get out.
He did.
That's right, he did.
Getting back to Dr. Rachie.
She's going onto her Facebook page, onto her blog, onto her Twitter account and going, I'm being censored. Well, no, you're not, because you've still got plenty of platforms to spout your nonsense. And it's the same as her saying that we're censoring her. We have just as much right in our freedom of speech and our democracy to say, we don't think you should be given a platform for that, and here are the reasons why.
Yeah.
So anyway, she's really, really angry about this. She mentioned at some point in the last couple of days that she was given 3.5 minutes by American Airlines. Now, my suspicion, and I don't know if this is true, is that she was probably given a community service announcement or a PSA, which indicates she wouldn't have paid for that time. We've actually seen the cost of advertising on the American Airways, American Way magazine, and it's not cheap. So
it's got a big reach, yeah.
I suspect she may have got this for free, maybe through the NVIC, National Vaccine Information, anyway, Barbara Fisher's people. So she's really very angry, and she's lashing out at Ken McLeod in the press. She's lashing out at Australian skeptics in the press.
Yes, she is.
She's blaming us for everything, even though I don't know what we had really that much to do with it.
Well, the Australian skeptics had nothing to do with it. Individually.
It's an organisation. Individuals.
We
were definitely trying to be involved. I mean, we sent it as soon as we found out. We alerted our American friends.
Yes.
I noticed.
But there was hardly any time for much action.
It was all
over.
Quick, and a few. I think the individuals that probably did have the most effect are probably not us. But there would be nothing wrong if it was us. Yeah. But I think it's the kind of thing that's public advocacy. That's what we do, and it's something that we would happily do again. And if we could assist with this kind of activity, we most certainly would. And did you say that you think she's very angry at the moment?
Oh, she's livid.
I'll be sleeping much better tonight.
She's livid.
Now, I've been looking at the website for the Australian Vaccination Network over the last few days, and that story's disappeared.
Has it really?
It's gone, yes.
Oh.
What's replaced it is a story. They've put up a video by somebody called Michael Belkin, and who has a band called The Refusers, right? Now, Michael's story is, and from what I could briefly research, his daughter sadly died when his daughter was 5 weeks old in 1998. And in his testimony to Congress, he says that it happened 15 hours after her second booster for hepatitis B. Be that as it may, that seems to be the catalyst for his activism. So he's written this song called First Do No Harm, right? And I'd just like to play a little bit of that now.
Watch out, families. Your baby's a target for medical charlatans to immunize. They make kids autistic and then they deny it. Don't trust their propaganda. They're telling you lies. Hippocrates said, don't hurt your patient. Modern medicine has forgotten his words. First do no harm. First do no.
So that's a little clip from that song. But on the website of the Australian Vaccination Network, what it says about the whole thing is Michael Belkin's band The Refusers has been producing music about vaccination and health for many years now. His perfectly healthy daughter, Lila Rose, died after receiving her Hep B vaccine at 5 weeks of age. This tragic experience sent him and his family on a journey to find out how vaccines can kill and maim children and why governments allow pharmaceutical companies to get in the way of putting untested, unsafe ingredients into shots that every man, woman and child is supposed to take for their health. This is a site that trumpets itself as being pro-choice and information. You can't get much more rabid anti-vaccination than that.
Sorry, I wasn't listening.
I don't blame you.
That stuff just goes over my head these days when it just goes like white noise.
If listeners care to look, you can go to just Google Australian Vaccination Network and you can see the clip.
Well, I got a flu vaccine because my dad always hassles me about it every year.
But Maynard, did you get it in your bum?
No, but I got the flu vaccine. And I won't live in a country where you can't ask me that question.
Thank you, Maynard, very much. Now, Maynard,
I just want to know if you're going to censor that and limit Maynard's freedom of speech.
Yeah. No, I think it's a freedom of comedy that should be it should be censored.
Now, the burning question our listeners want to know, Maynard, they want to know, What's in your bag?
Oh, well, actually, I've got a whole stack of stuff that people have been mentioning on the internets and the tweets, and because we've had an AVN-flavoured think tank, we probably won't get to any of them. But if you write to me personally, I'll be happy to talk to you. But it's time to play a round of a game we've never done here before called What's in Your Bag, Maynard?
What's in your bag, Maynard?
It's just 3 items randomly chosen from my house, because I rang up Richard, I said, look, I've got some things from the internet, or I could just choose some things from my house. And you said, Maynard, grab some things from your house and bring them in. So we'll start with a book here first. Look at that. Why Nations Fail, The Origins of Power, Prosperity and Poverty, by a guy's name who I can't pronounce, and James A. Robinson, his friend who I can. It's got over...
It's very thick.
500 pages of it, and I got to page 15 and had to stop because there were some big words. Can anyone tell me what a income extraction is organisation?
The tax department.
Oh, okay. Well, okay. I continue on to page 16. Now, that's okay. I was just wondering. So that's in my...
I don't know.
Okay.
Can I ask a question? Why are you reading that book?
Because it's a new book from Alan and Unwin, and they often...
free.
and they... And they often send me books, and I went, no, I'll read this, I'll give it a go, and it had the Stephen Levitt from Freakonomics on the top, giving it a heads up. So look, I've got a bit of reading to do.
So
and also with Maynard's been having all kinds of trouble. He's been having a hard time falling asleep, and this book helps tremendously.
Look,
so can we expect a review next
living in a country where we could expect an election before December, I wouldn't be so fast with that kind of comment there, Mr. Dual Citizenship. That's him. Yeah, look, top guy. Top guy. So that's number one. So I thought I'd start with the intellectual stuff, and then we go straight to
Maynard.
Hang on, we can chant again, can't we?
Yeah.
When there's somebody's name appears at the top, that does not mean they're a top guy.
Okay, right. Okay. Well, that means that he maybe told his conversation about why nations fail to James A. Robinson, who might have. Yeah. So anyway, look.
So Maynard.
What's in your bag, Maynard?
It's a CD of a classic Australian album, which you might not all have the CD of, but you may have this on vinyl at home. Quasimodo's Dream by The Reels. This came out earlier this year to not a lot of fanfare, and it's the only time it's been on CD. It's never been on CD till now. And, of course, it has the hits on it in Australia, Quasimodo's Dream, which is a legendary track, Shout and Deliver, After the News, According to My Heart. I think they're all the big hits, and that's not bad for one album. And the third thing, ask me what's in here.
What's in your bag, Maynard?
A DVD of Pee-wee's Playhouse Volume 2. I don't go into that Volume 1 crap. I go straight to Volume 2. And this has half of the episodes from Pee-wee's Playhouse. And look, if you're ever...
Is it still in the shrink wrap? It is.
Yeah. So if you're ever coming down on acid after a dance party, this is the DVD for you. Not that that's ever happened to me.
Now, I want to know whether this is a DVD that Pee Wee Herman appears in, or the type of DVD that Pee Wee Herman would watch.
Well, they're both different. One's for children and one's not. But by the way, he was cleared of that charge on appeal, by the way. Anybody in your historic...
Was he?
He was. It was like a lot of famous cases. You only know the original charge. You don't know what the appeal was.
Like Fatty Arbuckle.
Yeah, that's another one. He got the appeal too. That's still controversial to this day. Now, this is basically... It's got all the big characters on there, and the word of the day is... We used to have a word of the day on the think tank sometime.
What's the word of the day?
I don't know. It's a bit early since it's the end of it. But normally you say it at the beginning, and as soon as someone says the word...
I think we've still got a bit of time, Maynard. What are some of the questions our listeners have been flooding you with?
Well, there's a couple of them. Look, I just got onto Twitter and I said, I'm going to record this think tank tonight. What do you reckon? Look, actually, Jessica Adams actually replied, and it's got nothing to do with astrology whatsoever. And she was wondering, what is she... She reckons, and this isn't a prediction here, this is actually... She's asking, what do you think the internet's going to be like when the governments or hackers can potentially shut the internet down within 10 to 20 years? And I actually replied to her saying that I think we are currently living in a golden age of the internet, and in 5 years' time, everyone's ID will be so obvious that you won't be able to do anything anonymously, and that'll change the form of the internet completely.
We can only speculate.
Yeah, I mean,
no, you can only speculate. Jessica Adams should actually know.
Well, I don't.
That's a very good point.
I don't think this is in the form of a prediction. But she was going back to the time when she got onto the internet originally, and this would have been when you got onto the internet too, Richard.
95.
So she misses the internet when it was basically pumpkin soup recipes without pictures and science students in Scotland typing, which it was at one stage there. And I happen to mention that one of the most reoccurring things on the ABC Online website to this very day is called Flo's pumpkin scone recipe. Every once in a while, that'll pop up to the number 10 site nationally for the ABC.
I've had that recipe. They're great.
Now, is that Flo Bajorki-Peterson?
Yes.
It's the wife of the former Premier of Queensland. And
pumpkin scones are
was he actually a farmer that would have had pumpkins on there? I'm sure he would have.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, grown them himself. Yeah, so they're actually knockout recipes.
Oh, they're great. No doubt.
So I probably wouldn't mind going back to an internet that's got pumpkin scone recipes as long as there's photos.
Listeners, if you Google pumpkin scone recipe, go for it. They're delicious.
Yeah, Flo's pumpkin scone. Apparently they're pretty good and they keep coming up. I've got one last item.
One last question, and then that should wrap
Okay,
up.
right. Now, look, during this week, Wired Science reported that there was some holes in the outer ring of Saturn caused by an object. And I postulated that perhaps this was the ring makers, because we all know that aliens make the rings of Saturn.
Oh, yes.
Or maybe it's just me. So I just put that up, and Cosmic Ray actually said to me, well, it could be travellers in O'Neill cylinders replenishing their water supply. I thought, hang on, what is this slang for? So I went and had a look, and an O'Neill cylinder is actually one of the designs that could be possibly used for travelling in interstellar space. They're cylinders about 30 kilometres long, 3 kilometres wide, and by having two of them next to each other, it cancels out the torque of them revolving to create their own gravity, and you could fit probably 1 million people in them if you stack them in correctly. And they can work out the surface area. It's pretty good. And so
you could,
because because you could build up all the way around the cylinder. Yeah, and by having mirrors in there, you can mimic daylight and all sorts of things. And this is Cosmic Ray of Glebe, I believe, in Sydney, just suspecting that maybe if they were leaving the solar system, they were taking a quick visit to the rings of Saturn to pick up some ice, which would probably be there because of frozen water.
That's what they're made from, right? They're made from frozen water.
Yeah, so they might go through there to pick up a bit of old H2O on the way through, because let's face it, if you had to leave the Earth with all that water, it's pretty heavy. So, I think not a bad crackpot theory there.
How many light years to the rings of Saturn?
None.
It's not light years.
It's light minutes.
It's light minutes.
Light minutes.
Light minutes.
And I think it's Saturn is...
Well, Mars is 10 minutes
six astronomical units from Earth, so it's less than an hour.
Listeners can easily Google this information.
Listeners can easily get to Saturn.
And the very last one, and the very last question, comes from Aberdatchery once again. Now, on the Dirty Disbelievers, we brought up and solved the question of, is pavlova cake? And he wanted to know, is the great pavlova cake hypothesis been proven? The world is waiting. Well, but that once and for all, let me say, this has been proven. As a chemist would tell you, basically, pavlova exists as a duo point state, just as water can be in a tri-state, being solid, steam and water if you've got it in a fry pan. A pavlova and cake is duo point. It exists as a cake and dessert at the same time. Case closed.
And that's why, dear listener, you tune into the think tank to listen to Maynard talk about pavlova.
And duo points of cake.
It's there on the periodic table just next to Americonium. I'm sure you'll find it. Pavlovium.
Pavlonium.
Oh, no.
Listeners, I wish you could join us here in the think tank.
You
really
can't
do.
have your money back for the Las Vegas ticket, listeners.
It's been a pleasure, as always, to be back in our favourite club down the end of the street with thousands of people. Oh, they're all gone. I'd like to thank Maynard for coming along tonight to the think tank. Can't wait to see you in Vegas.
Yes, and remember, people, if you've got any questions specifically for anybody at or about the TAM, let me know and I'll try and put it to those people.
And Eran Segev, you'll be in Las Vegas too.
I will be in Las Vegas, and Saturn's distance from the Sun is 1.4 billion kilometres, which is just under 10 astronomical units, not 6.
Look, if you're in charge of the Voyager project, that'd be nothing. They'd go, don't talk to us, we're 16 light hours away from Earth, they'd tell you.
Absolutely.
Dr. Rachie. Thank you for your Dr. Rachie reports.
Thank you.
And until our next think tank, which I hope won't be too far away, once again, cheers, everybody.
Yeah, it was a very good interview with the Voyager woman.
Oh, wasn't she great?
Hi, this is Surly Amy from Skeptic.org. I make ceramic jewelry. It's hand-formed and hand-painted. It's inspired by science and skepticism. You can find it at surlyramics.com, surlyramics.com. Thanks, and be skeptical.
Thank you for listening to the Skeptic Zone. And thank you for everybody who pitched in and donated and bid on things on eBay to help get Maynard that ticket to TAM 10 in Las Vegas. We're only about, $400, less than that probably, of covering all Maynard's costs for that ticket. So keep chipping in, keep bidding on eBay, and if you wish to donate, that would be really fabulous. And don't forget, you can subscribe to the Skeptic Zone for less than $1 a week just by visiting www.skepticzone.tv. But getting Maynard to TAM 10 is a wonderful thing, and it just shows the power that everybody has, all the listeners have, to do something like that. And we're very grateful. Anyway, for this week, this is Richard Saunders signing off from Sydney, Australia.
You've been listening to the Skeptic Zone. Visit our website at www.skepticzone.tv for comments, contacts, and extra video reports.